Hello and welcome to episode 84 of Glitch Report. My name is GnittWitt. Thank you so much for stopping by, saying hi, kicking it with me today on the streams, the stream of dreams, the show of shows. You can find everything that I do over at my Linktree, linktree.com/GnittWitt, GnittWitt, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, you name it. I am there, just barely getting by, as I imagine a lot of folks are. So you may not know this. You may not know this, but there is a. Hold on, let me see if I can kind of articulate these thoughts here. I know I'm supposed to have them articulated prior to starting the show, but here I am. Um, as you may not know, we are in the midst of a video game industry mass layoff crisis. It seems like every week we are hearing news stories about um, layoffs after layoffs after layoffs across the industry, right? So, you know, you'll hear about Sony, you'll hear about, you know, EA, you'll hear about, the Embracer Group, you'll hear about Microsoft. It seems like it never ends. And I do this podcast, the Glitch Report podcast, every week, and the layoffs have actually changed the way I approach this podcast. So typically, I would get the news and the kind of the topics for the show ready sometime Wednesday morning. I record the podcast live Thursday mornings, twitch.tv/GnittWitt. But I get that stuff ready to go. Like, not, I would say a vast majority of the show is ready to go by Wednesday night. And I don't do that on the chance that I'm going to have to record on a Wednesday night. I just do it because I don't want to sit here in the morning and get a lot of the majority of that stuff ready to go. So it's the show's mostly prepared and ready to go to talk about by Wednesday night. However, in the wake of the news of game industry layoffs, I have started having to put together this show Thursday morning because of how rapidly um the world of layoffs is going right now. So I could be ready to go Wednesday night, wake up in the morning to do the podcast Thursday morning and be like, "Oh shit, Sony just cut 900 people, or EA just laid off, or Microsoft, or whatever." So that's one thing that changed. The other thing that changed is that the layoffs are happening to big and small companies. And I think it's important to recognize that it isn't just the big AAA, it is also smaller studios, your B tier studios, and even in some case indies as well. So the other thing that changed is that I've spent more time looking over the news before I even put the show together on Wednesday. I may thinking, well, Nitwit, you cover news on this. Shouldn't you know the news? And I'm not saying that I don't pay attention to the news, but the act of adding this, this literal topic to the show, now happens more regularly throughout the week than it has in the past because of the rapid nature of especially things like layoffs. So I do all this because we wouldn't be able to sit here and talk about video games if it weren't for the people that make the video games we get to sit around and talk about. And I've seen some awful shit on social media, Twitter especially, in regards to what people think the nature of game development is, what people think game developers are trying to do. A lot of this comes down to the tone and subject matter as it appears in some games. And I'm gonna crack open this can of worms a little bit, and I'm just gonna walk away. But there's a group of people, you call it silent minority or vocal minority, call it whatever the fuck you want. Um, but people who just deeply do not understand how video games work and the time and effort and care that goes into making games, goes even into making a bad game, goes into making a game that um struggles to articulate its ideas and falls flat on its face. A game that has a bad frame rate, a game that launches with broken online, a game that has bad monetization in the form of loot boxes and battle passes and skins, like all of the shit that we think about as like bad games is stuff that these developers who are rapidly losing their jobs are actively trying to avoid whenever they get the chance to do so. But games are made with finite resources and finite time, and ultimately the people that are managing the allocation of those resources, actually let me rephrase that. The people that are setting the budgets and the timelines for these games can be the people who have the tiniest understanding about how those resources are going to be spent and the realistic timeline of things. We're going to be talking about Warner Brothers later on the podcast. I'm just going to tease it now. You know, the Warner Brothers wants to focus on live service games and free to play games in a world where Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is a failure. Warner Brothers said it themselves. So you might be thinking, well, I can't believe Warner Brothers is going to go and make a bunch of shitty, god awful, bad video games. No, the people involved that think that this is the direction games to go are going in and should go in are the people that help make bland, boring, and uninteresting games. But the people who have to listen to their bosses and their bosses' bosses and the people that hold the purse strings, who then have to go make a game like Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League only to find out what we already knew going in and what the developers probably already knew going in is that people don't want this and that they don't have enough time and they don't have the resources to make it even close to a palatable version of what these bosses and CEOs and presidents had in mind. So just keep that in mind, right? Um this isn't video games are art. There's no denying that. There's no arguing that. But it is not art in the sense that these developers can purely make games for themselves, or that developers can purely make games um for their targeted audience, right? In a lot of cases there's a lot of stakeholders, shareholders, whatever you want to call them, involved that want to get their hands on that process to influence it. And that's when you see games that have identity crises like Suicide Squad killed it. And I'm not picking on Warner Brothers. I'm not picking on Suicide Squad. I'm not picking on Rocksteady. It's just the example that I'm using. I could have chose Saints Row. I could have, the reboot of Saints Row. I could have chose a variety. I could have picked fucking Forza Motorsport. It's just the game that I'm using. So I'm not, whatever. The people that don't understand how video games are made and developed, and I'm not even telling you that I'm an expert on it. I am just considerate of the fact that making these games, especially big budget AAA games, is a a wire act. They are walking this tightrope, unlike most other creative industries. Then again, the people that don't understand that are also the people who would tell me, yo, dog, why are you picking on Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League? Why are you doing this and this? And it's like, dog, fucking think about it for just a moment in terms of what you are asking of these developers to do when their hands at times are tied to their are bound by their corporate masters. And I hate to make such dark imagery like that as being, kind of at the whims of the people that run Warner Brothers or whatever the case may be. But the fact is that some games come out and they look like games that an executive designed top to bottom, and then the actual creative people had to cobble together, right? So when these people lose their jobs, it's not something to celebrate. It's not something that they should have seen coming. It's not something that they deserved. It's almost never that case. I don't care how bad the game was that they made, right? They could have made the worst game of 2023. They don't deserve they don't deserve it. They frankly don't deserve it, because going back to what I originally said, let's pick on Gollum for a moment. 2023 is one of 2023's worst game, Gollum. Do the people involved deserve to lose their jobs if it has been found that they were not given the resources required to do a good enough job? Now, you would argue, well, shit, if I built a house and a big bad wolf came down and blew down that house, I'm going to be in trouble for not building the best house. But the problem is that in this capitalist society, we have bosses, we have managers, we have leaders, we have CEOs that are paid to take responsibility and to take risks and to steer companies into certain directions. And then when it is discovered that these leaders made bad choices, Embracer Group is a terrific example. We spent all this money in the hopes that Saudi Arabia would give us a bunch of the money that we already spent. Oh, wait, they didn't. Well, instead of the leadership taking responsibility, they get their golden parachutes. They get the fuck out of there. And then they let go Free Radical Designs. They sell Saber Interactive, whatever the case may be. Do the people involved who were maybe making not the best games under Embracer Group's ownership, or weren't given the resources required, are they actually the problem? Are they the ones that should be let go? Dude, and if they are, do they deserve it? I would say no. But again, try telling that we're like 20 minutes ish into this podcast, roughly. The time's off because I have music going before I start the show. But the point is that I just spent all that time trying to provide a nuanced take. I'm not saying I'm an expert. I am not saying I am the smartest man alive when it comes to games. I am not saying any of that stuff. I'm not even saying that the stuff that I'm saying is 100% accurate or realistic. But I'm trying to provide some amount of nuance, some amount of consideration when it comes to the state of things. Because what you see on Twitter is people who have no nuance to them whatsoever, a lack of critical thinking, the inability to critically read what is being presented, and grifters, people who are, trying to rile up a certain group of people, a certain fan base by saying, oh, well, they were, the Saints Row team was fired because they made the game woke, right? Motherfucker, they made a game that is reflective of the world in which it was created in. Maybe it had some technical shortcomings. Maybe the design wasn't great. Maybe the writing was bad. But to sit here and say, oh, well, Volition deserved to be closed down because they made the game woke. You have no fucking idea what you are even talking about. And I would argue that, and I also see this a lot with wrestling, and this is not a wrestling podcast, and I promise you, this will never be a wrestling podcast. But the people who spend so much time being so angry about the stupidest parts about their hobby, the most realistic, and set the most unrealistic expectations, whether it be games, wrestling, whatever, it's like, maybe you need a new hobby. Like, go touch the grass. Go, and I'm not talking marijuana. I'm talking sit in a park and think about the part where you are so angry about video games. For all of the wrong reasons. You could take that energy and actually be mad at the people who are the problem. But instead of being mad at the people who are the problem, you are so angry that you yourself become the problem by saying some stupid shit, for being lacking any consideration for the people who actually make the games, and completely misunderstanding the industry in general. Right? So I'm not going to tell these people, hey, you should stop playing video games, you should go outside. Because they're not going to listen, and I hope they don't listen, because I don't want these people listening to this podcast. I had people on Twitter just a few days ago ripping into me, and this is not a woe is me, like I'm a big boy, I can handle it. But I commented on a Kotaku tweet basically saying that the people who are mad about this are people that I'm looking forward to blocking on Twitter. More or less, that's what I said. You can listen, I'm not hiding anything. If you go to my Twitter and look through, like, you can see the tweet. I'm not hiding anything, but I'm just paraphrasing. So I said, oh, the people that are mad about this stupid thing, I look forward to blocking them on Twitter. And then I had people just rip into me, just try to rip me a new asshole, like get in that ass, Larry, Curb Your Enthusiasm type shit. Ripping into me for not getting a lot of likes on the tweets that I post, making fun of me for only having like 53 subscribers on YouTube, trying to belittle my opinion because of the amount of followers I have on social media. And it turns out that those are also the people who think that Volition should have been shut down because they apparently made Saints Row woke. Those are the people who fail to understand the nature of game development. The people who are mad at Embracer Group for all the wrong reasons. And if those people don't want to listen to the show, that's totally fine. If those people want to make fun of me on Twitter, I'm a big boy, I can handle it. It's fine. And in fact, I would argue that the bullshit that I saw this week on my personal social media from people adding me and replying and all that shit isn't nearly as bad as the people who are genuinely targeted by these lunatics day in and day out. People who are, let's just cut to the chase. If they think that the video game industry is too woke, they probably hate women who play video games. They probably hate trans people who play video games. They probably hate gay people that play video games. They probably hate people of various skin colors and ethnicities that play video games. They probably hate gamers who have needs, whether that be able-bodied needs or cognitive needs or whatever the case may be. And those people are almost always the target of this hate and ire. And I am a straight white male who can just play video games and not think about any of this shit. But I do, and anytime someone who looks and sounds like me thinks about that stuff, I become an enemy the same way a gay person would be, for being like, hey, I don't see myself in, if a gay person says, oh, I don't see myself in a lot of the big AAA games. I don't see a lot of people who look and sound like me. I don't feel represented. I'm over here looking like a motherfucker who would vote for Donald Trump. And I'm over here saying, I don't know, man, those people should probably feel included and welcomed and loved in the game industry the way that I feel the same way. But then goes back to the made Saints Row woke. Goes back to, oh, they're, they deserve to be shut down for XYZ purposes. Remember when real gamers made real video games? But goddamn, the amount of shit I saw at a time when uh this industry is losing people left, right, and center. The people who actually make the games. It's not like CEOs are getting out. The CEOs come and go because the fucking guy from Kellogg's is going to decide that, you know, Activision is the right place to go, or whatever the case may be. God damn. God damn. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get to news. Stick around. We'll be right back. Let's move on to news. We got a huge amount of Nintendo news. Nintendo is out there flexing its legal muscles, specifically as it relates to emulation. Whether that be 3DS emulation, the Nintendo 3DS handheld system, or the Nintendo Switch emulation. Flexing its legal muscles in a couple of different ways. Switch emulator Tropic Haze has settled with Nintendo over the creation of the emulator Yuzu for $2.4 million. Tropic Haze also no longer offering the Yuzu emulator. Now, here's the thing you need to know. So, if you have a computer of any kind that is powerful enough, you can often emulate video game consoles on your computer, right? There's a couple things you need to know about that, but basically you can take your PC and turn it into a PlayStation 2. You can take your PC and turn it into a Nintendo Switch. Now you might be thinking, the PS2 is pretty old at this point. Maybe people wouldn't have such a big, problem with emulating the PlayStation 2 and the PS2 games compared to a console like the Nintendo Switch that is actively being produced and had games for developed for, because emulation can potentially go hand in hand with piracy, right? Of like, oh, I'm not buying Nintendo Switch games because emulating the Switch on my PC produces better graphics and better technical results for the same games compared to if I bought, say, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom on the Switch and played it on the Switch itself. Because you legally can, and I'm not an expert on law, I'm not an expert on a lot of things, but you can dump your games to your computer. Whatever console you have, if you have a PS2, you can buy disk drives and hardware and software that allow you to digitize that PS2 game onto your PC because you legally own the game. The problem with emulation is that there is software that is required to run the console itself. And part of that software is something called a BIOS. And the BIOS is copyrighted software that is built into the console. So when you fire up a PlayStation 5, for example, and you're scrolling through the menus and all that stuff, that is copywritten software that is on the console. You cannot modify that software for your own game. You can, however, buy a Blu-ray disc drive and digitize your copy of Horizon Forbidden West onto a computer if you want. First of all, I don't know if there's anybody emulating the PS5 on a PC right now. Though I'm sure that is coming down the road. So what happens with emulation? Well, people dump the games. People start to digitize and dump the games. If people can make software that emulates the console experience, and if people dump the BIOS that runs on the emulation software, we're getting real close to piracy, if not on full-blown piracy. And I'm not here to tell you one way or the other whether piracy is good or bad, or what you should or shouldn't do it. I am not going to be, if I've learned anything from this podcast so far, it's that I'm not going to be some sort of moral police for anybody. However, if you go to the internet and you type in Yuzu Switch emulator, download that, then download the Nintendo Switch BIOS, and then, no, because the emulator's not checking to see if you legally own this copy of Tears of the Kingdom that you've digitized to run on the emulator. So you can see where the gears start to turn of like, oh, I didn't actually own this game. Someone else dumped it onto the internet. I'm downloading it. I'm doing this and that, especially in a scenario where the Switch is still being actively sold. You can see, and I'm not telling you that all these emulators are pirates. A lot of people are emulating games to preserve video games because you can't play a lot of PlayStation 2 games or PlayStation 1 games or even PS3 games or whatever in a easy and convenient manner because the companies that own these games do not give a fuck, including Sony and including Nintendo and Microsoft and all of that stuff, right? So that is one of the reasons why people will risk piracy in order to preserve a game, because people are like, hey man, someone needs to be able to play Rugrats Search for Reptar on the PlayStation 1, and damn it, we're going to make sure that you can do that, even if it means piracy, because you cannot do it anywhere else. Nintendo, one of the companies, back to the kind of the topic at hand, Nintendo, one of the companies that is very protective of emulation on all their consoles, more so than even Sony or Microsoft. And that's how we get here, where you have a legendary company like Nintendo with a huge amount of games and back catalogs and IPs and consoles that are often the target of emulation, tinkerers, for lack of a better word. And Nintendo is very protective with lawyers that are ready to jump. So this is how Tropic Haze, the creator of the Switch emulator Yuzu, ended up being sued by Nintendo last month. The platform holder had claimed that Yuzu was, quote, facilitating piracy at a colossal scale. On Monday, the two parties mutually agreed on a monetary settlement and a permanent injunction. As part of the judgment by the U.S. District Court of Rhode Island, Tropic Haze has issued a permanent injunction preventing it from offering or marketing Yuzu or any of its source code in the future. Its members are also prevented from creating any future software that circumvents Nintendo's technical protection, and Tropic Haze must surrender all website domains and information related to its emulator. This permanent injunction constitutes a binding court order, and any violations by Tropic Haze or its members will subject them to the full scope of the court's contempt authority, including punitive and monetary sanctions. In its initial lawsuit documents, Nintendo claimed that last year's biggest Switch release, The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom, was pirated over 1 million times in the week and a half before its release in May. So over 1 million people playing that game before the game even came out, pirated on a piece. It's not like, oh, some mom and pop shop, I went to some local game store, they had it, the guy was like, I'll sell it to you now, or the person at the Walmart who's working in the electronics department was high on drugs and said, yeah man, I can just give you the Zelda now, it's okay bro. Like, no, this is stealing the game before it's even out. Quote, with Yuzu in hand, nothing stops a user from obtaining and playing unlawful copies of virtually any game made for the Nintendo Switch, all without paying a dime to Nintendo or any of the hundreds of other game developers and publishers making and selling games for the Nintendo Switch. In effect, Yuzu turns general computing devices into tools for massive intellectual property infringement and others' copyrighted works. Again, I'm not going to tell you go pirate, don't pirate. I'm not here to tell you any stuff. I'm just saying this is what's happened, and this is what a company like Nintendo is willing to do. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that some pirates, some people that are focusing on emulation are doing it for the love of the game or game preservation, whatever you want to call it. And by that, I mean they are doing it for free. When you have a company that is selling pirated software, emulation, pirated games, things like that, then Nintendo has or a company like Nintendo has even more of an incentive to go after them, because now they are stealing, their these cigarettes were found on the side of the road and are now being resold by somebody else. So you can see how we get here in that scenario. But that's not the only emulation news. Preservationists are upset at Nintendo Switch lawsuit, which also shut down a 3DS emulator. Citra was a Nintendo 3DS emulator, which was originally created in April of 2014 and continued to receive regular updates until February of this year. The core Citra team went on to create the Switch emulator Yuzu, which was part of the whole lawsuit. The settlement has seen a similar shutdown for the Citra emulator, a move which some commenters suggest is a blow for game preservation. They argue that while Yuzu is morally and ethically dubious because it allows users to play backups of currently commercially available software, Citra is somehow less egregious because the games it plays are by and large considered archive titles that are no longer being sold by Nintendo. Which, in fairness, Nintendo closed the Nintendo 3DS eShop in March of 2023, which means its entire library of digital games, many of which were eShop exclusives, have been impossible to legally acquire for nearly a year now. As such, some have been arguing the emulation is the only way to access these games today, making it important for game preservation. Holly Nielsen, a historian who specializes in games and in play and games, Holly Nielsen, a historian who specializes in playing games, noted on Twitter that while she can access board games from the 1800s as part of her research, some games from just a few years ago are harder to obtain. Quote, "It is very worrying that in many ways it is easier for me to research games made in the 19th century than it is to research digital games." This is what Holly Nielsen wrote. Quote, "Unless there is a flood or fire at the archive, the games I look at are relatively accessible and playable. Not the case for many digital games, just something to think about when it comes to emulation and preservation." Accessibility expert Laura Kate Dale also noted that Citra was useful for players with accessibility needs, and its closure will harm them. Citra, quote, "Citra, the primary 3DS emulator, being made unavailable sucks not only for preservation, but also accessibility. Citra allowed a method for playing 3DS games on larger screens using accessibility-focused alternative input devices and controllers. With a system you could no longer purchase games for digitally, piracy isn't hurting the bottom line. Losing Citra undoubtedly means some disabled players losing access to the option of experiencing 3DS titles. It should be stressed that despite the arguments in favor of emulation, the sharing of ROM images is copyrighted video. The sharing of ROM images of copyrighted video games remains illegal. Way to remind us. That was from Video Games Chronicles. As always, shout out to Video Games Chronicles. I'm not even going to tell you if emulating games that you cannot legally buy is piracy or not. I'm not going to out myself one way or the other. Just something to think about. That it is legal. However, it is the only way for you to play some of these games. Speaking of games you can play, well, in the future, you'll be able to play these games. Xbox had a partner preview just yesterday, a roundup of major news from Xbox's third-party showcase. So, similar to the way Sony and Nintendo do it, these games that have been announced are most likely going to be coming to PlayStation as well. However, because it's the focus of Xbox, these games may be coming to Game Pass day one. They may be temporarily exclusive, whatever the case may be. But if they sound interesting, if they sound interesting, it's also very possible they'll be played on other consoles if you so desire. And before we get into this, I watched it. I watched the whole thing. I don't always watch these. I instead sometimes go back and I just watch the individual trailers, or I read a news story similar to what I'm pulling up here. But I watched this whole thing, and while there are very cool games, potentially cool games being shown, it is perhaps one of the more forgettable ones that I've seen. And I know that sounds fucked up to say, considering these games aren't even out yet. But there was a part. Okay, so they do this. I feel like the Xbox partner preview has taken cues from something like Monday Night Raw, WWE's Monday Night Raw, in the sense that like a third of the way into the presentation, they actually go back and remind you of what you've seen. And they tell you if the game that was shown was a debut or not. So if you were like, oh, they're reminding us that this game's coming out, or this is an update on the game or whatever, that is different than if they're like, yo, this is the first time you're ever seeing the Sinking City 2 or whatever, right? And it just got me thinking, like, maybe if this presentation was more exciting, they wouldn't have needed to remind me twice a third of the way through the show. It was like a 40-minute thing. It wasn't like super long. That, hey, I just saw this game, or hey, this game's, debut or whatever. Found a little strange in the way that like WWE Raw, especially because it's 3 hours long, will be like, hey, remember what happened 5 minutes ago? And they're guilty of maybe reminding you of things that you literally just saw. But the point still stands in the context of a 40-minute thing. Reminding me of a thing that I saw 15 minutes ago is like, no, it didn't look whatever. It looked fine. It looked cool, whatever. But let's actually get into what they showed. The Sinking City 2, which Frogwares is saying is going to be more of a survival horror game than the previous Sinking City 2, kind of a Lovecraftian survival horror detective thing. I never played the Sinking City 1 for what it's worth. However, the game is coming to Xbox Series X and S in 2025, as well as PS5 and PC. Creatures of Ava, which is being co-developed by Spanish studio Inverge, and Chibig is an action-adventure game where players tame creatures to save the world from a life-consuming infection. Sort of seems like a more chill, low-key, cozy take on something like Power World, though it's hard to say if this game is going to be action-adventure or survival, but it's like, it looks like you are, acquiring Pokemon-like creatures as part of the game. Coming to Xbox Series X and S and PC in 2024, including Game Pass. And then we just get off the rails. Like, this is where I'm like, does this rank? Is this something that like should be? Milestone and Feld Motorsports have also revealed Monster Jam Showdown. Listen, I'm not saying that, like, listen, I'm not too good for Monster Jam. I watch professional wrestling, okay? I am not too good for Monster Jam. It's just weird to be like, okay, like, these are like, a Sinking City 2, okay, cool, out of left field games, whatever, about creatures, and then it's just like Grave Digger, and it's like, what? The other thing is that I don't know if, other than graphically, have monster truck games changed in the last like 20-30 years? I guess, you know what? I guess I'm gonna have to play Monster Jam Showdown and find out. It is coming out this year for everything: Xbox, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch, and PC. There's a quote. I'll read the quote. The two powerhouse companies will once again join forces to launch Monster Jam Showdown, the brand new official Monster Jam video game, bringing life to the most action-packed motorsport event on four wheels. So, I don't really think about it because I don't think a lot about Monster Jam. Maybe I should. But is Gravedigger the Undertaker of trucks? Is that how that works? Is Gravedigger the Undertaker of trucks? please humor me for a moment. Grave Digger, the Undertaker of trucks. I'm going to type that into Google. Is Grave Digger the Undertaker of trucks? Reddit. Why is it that Grave Digger is the only monster truck that anyone knows about? It's a great question. These are the questions that keep me up at night. Maybe these are the questions that will be answered when we play, what the fuck's that game called? Monster Jam Showdown. This Reddit post does not want to load for me. That's fine. It's fine. Whatever. I'm surprised, like, obviously, you know, WrestleMania and all that shit takes place in big arenas. I'm surprised that, like, Undertaker never drove the Grave Digger truck. I don't know if you need, like, a special license for that. Though Undertaker is a undead zombie wizard, you'd like to think that if he could, you know, make an urn float and all that shit, that he could get the license needed to drive a monster truck. Anyways, Monster Jam, look for it, fool. Sleight of Hand. Let's move on. Sleight of Hand is a third-person card-slinging occult noir stealth sim. That's going to be coming out day one on Game Pass and on Xbox and PC in 2025. It will also launch on Steam. Now, there were some leaks going around, and the leaks have been confirmed. We've talked about Stalker 2. Who knows when Stalker 2 is going to come out? But Stalker 2 does have a trilogy of games that preceded it. I'm talking about Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl, its prequel, Stalker Clear Sky, and its sequel, Stalker Call of Pripyat. And those games have come together. They have formed like Voltron to make Stalker The Legends of the Zone trilogy. That is available for Xbox One and Xbox One and PS4. If you've never played the Stalker games, if you are excited about Stalker 2, if you are looking for a first-person post-apocalyptic shooter, but don't want to play something like Metro or something like Fallout, or if you've played those games already, you could go back and play Stalker, The Legends of the Zone trilogy. Those games are old games. Those are older games that are being put out. I'm sure that they've redone controls and all that stuff. I found the Stalker games to be somewhat impenetrable. If I go over here, and maybe I'm just gonna have to like sit down one of these days and stream one of these games and just fucking figure it out like live on a camera. But I have, you know, I've talked about Metro before, and I've talked about some of these other games before. For me, I'm more of a Fallout guy than anything. But I do have two of the Stalker games. I have Clear Sky and I have Call of Pripyat, and they always just seem like janky and penetrable games. But maybe I need to give them another chance, because I'm sure other people will be talking about them now that the Legends of the Zone trilogy is out. Persona 3 Reloaded expansion pass was also announced, featuring new costumes, background music, and an extended story content. The DLC will be released in 3 waves. It is available on Game Pass Ultimate, and it will culminate with the release of Persona 3 Reloaded Episode Aegis: The Answer in September 2024. Capcom out there just showing off some weird games. Like, this is probably the weirdest game that Capcom showed. Or this is probably the weirdest game shown at this Xbox Partners Program. Partner preview, excuse me. Kunitsu Gami Path of the Goddess is a single-player game set in a Japanese-inspired universe which, quote, follows in the tradition of truly unique titles such as Okami and Shinsekai Into the Depths, according to the publisher. This game is like a action real-time strategy game. If there's one game that you go watch the trailer for to try to wrap your mind around, I would say check out Kunitsu Gami Path of the Goddess, because there's not a lot of games that are quite like that in terms of mixing tactics and commanding armies and troops
with also real-time, hack and slash sort of action combat. Cool looking, maybe also impenetrable, but maybe not quite like the way that the soccer games are kind of impenetrable. But it's coming to Game Pass, so I really have no reason to not check it out. Surgent Studios and EA have come together to show us a first look gameplay of Tales of Kinzaria Zao. It is a side-scrolling Metroidvania action-adventure exploration game, very similar to something like Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Zao looks really cool. It looks really, really neat. I am looking forward to it. That is coming to Xbox, PS5, PC, Switch, April 23rd. That is very, very soon. It looks neat. Features the voice actor from the main voice actor of Bayek in Assassin's Creed Origins. Seems to tell a very personal story about the loss of his father, among other things. And, those games kind of live and die by their gameplay, by the tools that they give you to explore. And hey, when you see a locked door, how do you open it? How do you get around it? How does it, kind of, keep track of the things you have found but don't have access to, so on and so forth. But Tales of Kinzaria Zao looking pretty neat. The first Berserker Kazan is a new single-player hardcore action RPG based in the Dungeon and Fighter universe, scheduled to come out on PS5 and Xbox Series X and S. This game had a fucked up frame rate, and I don't know, maybe it's just not done. I don't know. Like, it certainly can't be done. They didn't really give a date. But the frame rate on that thing looked not so hot. It was kind of hard to wrap my mind around. Like, is it going for a stylized, look? Or is the game just not done? Kind of weird. Looked like a, hardcore kind of action game. It looked all right, though. I can't complain. 11-Bit Studios has released gameplay for The Alters, which will launch later this year on PC and consoles. It is a sci-fi game where you take on the role of Jan Dulski, quote, a simple worker who creates alternate versions of himself in a desperate attempt to escape from the planet where even sun rays can prove deadly. So he basically is on Earth 6 years from now when climate change is preparing to kill us all. The look of The Alters is super neat. It has this like big wheel in it. It's like this sci-fi wheel that is his base of operations that rolls around. A really neat look. Hard to get your head around like what it is you're doing in the game. Perhaps you're doing survival, crafting, a lot of that stuff. But that looked neat. The Alters looked cool. Bandai Namco released an announcement trailer for Unknown 9 Awakening, which is a third-person narrative-driven action-adventure game that follows the story of Haruna, a quest star born with the ability to venture into the fold, a mysterious dimension that overlaps our own. Quote, on her quest for powerful hidden knowledge, she will learn to master her unique connection to the fold, which allows her to channel its powers into our world. But such power does not go unnoticed. Haruna quickly becomes the target of the Ascendants, a splinter faction of a secret organization known as the Leap Year Society, which wants to use the fold to alter the course of human history. Cool action, like stealth action sort of, gameplay, with mystical powers and all that stuff. Really neat looking game. Though not much else currently known about it. I'm just pulling up the trailer here, other than summer 2024, but it's also coming to PS5, PS4, Xbox, and Steam. So if you are into Unknown 9 The Awakening, a terrible name for what is otherwise a very cool looking video game, check it out. And then finally, it was confirmed that Final Fantasy XIV will be released for Xbox Series X and X on March 21st, and Frostpunk will be hitting PC, including Game Pass, on July 24th, 2024. That is it for the Xbox Partners preview. Like I said, I don't think it was bad. It just was maybe a tad underwhelming. And some of the games, especially that 11-bit Studios one, just looked unfinished. But games are hard. It's hard to make games. It is hard to present games. It's hard to present unfinished games in a finished in a finished presentation. So I get it. I'm not going to poo-poo that game anymore. Let's talk about Warner Brothers. So this was, you need some context. This was at a Morgan Stanley conference, where Warner Brothers CEO of global streaming and games presented, and it was like at the end of the presentation. Like, it wasn't like Morgan Stanley and everybody sitting around. I know Morgan Stanley's not a person, it's an organized group, whatever company. It's not like they were all sitting around talking about games. They were talking about Warner Brothers and whatnot. But the CEO of global streaming and games did make this statement during the conference. Quote, "The majority of our business revolves around 4 main forms of IP in games, which are all billion-dollar plus businesses themselves. Those IPs are," and keep in mind that Warner Brothers owns, fucking Ted Turner and DC and Dune and all of this stuff. Is Warner Brothers Dune? I think Warner Brothers is Dune. Anyways, here are the 4 main IPs that Warner Brothers wants to focus on when it comes to games. Those IPs are Mortal Kombat, Game of Thrones, DC, and Harry Potter. And keep in mind that Hogwarts Legacy was 2023's best-selling game, and their current game, Suicide Squad Kills Justice League, has failed to meet the company's expectations. This is by JB Perrette, the CEO of Global Streaming and Games. Quote, "The challenge we've had is that our business historically has been very AAA console based, and so, as you know, that's a great business when you have a hit like Harry Potter. It makes the year look amazing. And then when you don't have a release, or fortunately, we also have disappointments. We just released Suicide Squad this quarter, which was not as strong. It makes it very volatile," said Perrette. Now, everyone's favorite CEO, David Zaslav, said in December that the company was focused on, quote, "transforming our biggest franchises from largely console and PC based with 3 or 4 year release schedules to include more always-on gameplay through live services, multi-platform, and free-to-play extensions, with the goal to have more players spending more time on more platforms," which is something that Perrette reiterated during this week's Morgan Stanley conference, saying, quote, "We think the opportunity for us," which again, this is a multi-year opportunity because games is certainly a bit of a long business cycle too, but the opportunity is to take those 4 franchises and be able to develop as a much more holistic approach, particularly around expanding into mobile and multi-platform free-to-play space, which could give us a much better and consistent set of revenue. And you'll see us launching later this year some mobile free-to-play games, which we hope will start building that. And then secondly, live services. So rather than just launching a kind of one-and-done console game, how do we develop a game around, for example, Hogwarts Legacy or Harry Potter? This is a live service where people can come today and live and work and build and play in that world on an ongoing basis. I love that he put play last. Because when I come to video games, I come to video games to live and work and build. And I'm lucky if I get to play anything that's fun, right? It's fucking so stupid. I mean, here's the thing. Some of those live service games feel like work, right? Of, oh, I have X amount of time to complete this, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 challenge before it goes away. And even though it's a totally optional challenge and I can just play the game to enjoy it, they are giving me this carrot on the stick of like, hey, you have 23 days to finish your battle pass. Did you want to work towards it? You want to grind it out, dog? And all this shit. He continues on. And so we think we've got the franchises, we've got some of the greatest studios, some of the greatest studio capabilities, and we have a roadmap and a strategic investment plan to try and build out that business. And we think there's meaningful growth over the course of the next couple of years. It has been confirmed that Suicide Squad's first season of post-release content, which will include the Joker, will launch on March 28th. So this is what I mean when I say that, like, the people in, like, the big wigs in charge of video game development sometimes don't have a sometimes do not have a fundamental understanding of what makes a game successful, why their game was successful. And listen, I don't love Hogwarts Legacy. I don't love Harry Potter, the Harry Potter game, but it's undeniable that it was the most successful game of last year. A lot of people really liked the game. A lot of people liked that game. A lot of people bought that game. Maybe they liked it, maybe they didn't. But a lot of people didn't go out and buy Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, regardless of whether they liked it or not. And if I see the success, if I was a businessman and I saw the success of something like Harry Potter, Hogwarts Legacy, and then I saw the failings of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, my first thought wouldn't be, how do I turn Hogwarts Legacy into Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League? I would say, how do I make sure the next DC game ends up more like Hogwarts Legacy than another Suicide Squad? Because I'll tell you right now, once you play through Hogwarts Legacy, like, there's not a lot of stuff to do once you finish the game. They very well could have found a way to continue producing content for that game, whether they sold it, however they monetize it, I don't know. But they very well could have supported Hogwarts Legacy longer than they did, but they chose not to. They sold like one DLC pack, the Defense Against the Dark Arts pack for Hogwarts Legacy, right? Whereas before Kill the Justice League even came out, they were like, yo, dog, we got this roadmap. We're going to put the Joker in the game later and all this shit. They didn't do that for Hogwarts Legacy. To me, I would find, if I was a businessman, I would find ways to replicate success within my current portfolio instead of, and the success that actually happened. Like, it's not just that, you know, live service games are growing less and less popular. It's that people genuinely enjoyed Hogwarts Legacy and probably would have played more of it had something else been available. I'm not saying that they should make a Hogwarts Legacy live service game. I'm just saying that you don't necessarily need to go down that road if you can find other ways to support a successful game. And one of the ways that you can make sure a game's successful is by making sure that it is as good as Hogwarts Legacy prior to launch, which is something they weren't able to do with Suicide Squad. Oh, we're going to keep going. We actually have more Warner Brothers news in just a moment. But first, remember that hack that happened at Epic Games? Remember when that ransomware group hacked Epic Games? Turns out it was a hoax, and the ransomware company was actually trying to defraud Epic Games by faking the hack and then selling them fake data that they had harvested, or they were going to sell it to whoever, right? But Epic Games was not actually hacked. The ransomware group admitted that it was a hoax. That's just a quick news story. Going back to WB, I got to warn a brother about Warner Brothers, you know what I'm saying? I was at a McDonald's not that long ago. And I'm sitting at the McDonald's eating my food, eating the mixed slop. And I was looking around and I noticed something. And this has been talked about for a while, but it was talked about, it was rumored, it was speculated, and it was leaked, but I never thought of it So I'm not saying that like this is new to me. It just clicked basically. I just realized what was going on, like the arrow in the FedEx logo. I saw a bunch of multiverses posters, in and around the McDonald's, and I thought to myself, multiverses isn't out. They just pulled that game like last year. And then I realized that the reason they're putting these multiverses posters in the McDonald's is because that game is probably going to come back with a full launch like they said it would. And after 8 months of silence, the Multiverse's Twitter account has teased an announcement. That is the first update since last June when the game's open beta ended and it went on hiatus ahead of a release for 2024. So I don't know if if McDonald's spoiled the multiverses thing or what. But that tease came shortly after a Happy Meal page on the Australian McDonald's website said multiverses promotion was, quote, coming soon. But like I said, I was at a McDonald's for last. I eat McDonald's. Okay, I eat it. I'm not above it. I eat McDonald's. What do you want from me? Point is I was at that McDonald's and I saw the multiverses posters and I was like, oh right, multiverses. What if Batman fought the Tasmanian devil? That's all I have to say about that. Last two news stories here. EA is confident that Dragon Age Dreadwolf will come out this year. And I'm imagining that's because EA is itching to let go some other developers, especially if a game like Dragon Age Dreadwolf does not hit. And I know that sounds cynical. I know that sounds jaded, but EA has let go people for less over, smaller things. Early gameplay of the RPG appeared online in February. Now, this whole thing about EA being confident that Dreadwolf is going to come out this year is according to Giant Bomb journalist Jeff Grubb. Quote, I suspect Dragon Age Dreadwolf will probably pop up in the summer. Jeff Grubb claimed, I don't know when it'll be shown, but I assume it'll be shown sometime this summer. On the potential release window for the game, Grubb said it will be released this year. Last I heard, EA are pretty confident about that. That doesn't mean it's a guarantee. It could slip, but right now, internally, they expect it to release later this year. Now, a full reveal of Dragon Age Dreadwolf is scheduled for the summer, according to EA, whether that be at Jeff Keighley's Summer Game Fest or at EA's own thing or whatever. There's no E3 now, so what are you going to do? I'm very curious about Dragon Age Dreadwolf. I'm very, very curious. In a world where people are hotter for RPGs now than ever before, with the success of something like The Witcher 3, with the success of JRPGs like Yakuza, Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth, with the success of stuff like Baldur's Gate 3, I'm very, very curious to see how Dragon Age Dreadwolf shapes up, because people loved Dragon Age Origins. They fucking loved Dragon Age Origins. BioWare are grandfathers of traditional RPGs to some extent. So it's very curious to see, I might be more of a Mass Effect guy, but I am still very, very curious to see how Dragon Age shapes up. Last October, BioWare General Manager Gary McKay said that Dragon Age Dreadwolf had reached its alpha status and that was playable from the opening scenes of the first mission to the very end. Gary McKay went on to explain that the team was focused on the game's pacing, the various relationships that players will have with other characters, as well as, quote, narrative cohesion. BioWare said in August that it was laying off approximately 50 employees as part of a shift to becoming, quote, a more agile and focused studio. And this new story I left at the end, it's exciting, but really selfishly, I'm really excited about it. This is probably, I don't know if I'll end up playing a lot of like brand new 2024 games considering what is happening now. Because later this month, Horizon Forbidden West is going to come to PC. I cannot wait to play that. Assuming it's not a broken, version of the PC, port like Last of Us Part 1 was. I will get Horizon Forbidden West day one. Sign me up. Can't wait. But Sony has announced, and I cannot, this was the game. This was the game that I wanted to play on PC. More than Horizon, more than Last of Us Part 2, more than Spider-Man. This game was the game that I wanted to play on PC. I've never played it on PlayStation. I could have played it on PS4. I didn't. I don't have a PS5, so I can't play the director's cut there. This game that Sony has announced is coming to PC is the game that I want to play from Sony more than anything. Sony has announced that Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut is coming to PC in May. That is the game made by former Infamous, sorry, not former, I mean, they made it. But this is the game that is made by Infamous and Sly Cooper Studio, Sucker Punch. It is the open world samurai Japanese, action adventure game. Ghost of Tsushima, that is the director's cut of the game. It is in development at Nixies in collaboration with the original creator Sucker Punch. That is coming out May 16th on Steam and Epic Games. Originally released in July of 2020 for the PS4, is the open world action adventure game set during the Mongol invasion of Japan in 1274. Players take on the role of Jin Sakai, a samurai warrior whose adventure draws on Japanese history and the tradition of samurai cinema to craft what Sucker Punch calls, quote, a gorgeous tale of revenge, empowerment, and hope. There was also post-launch content for the game, which was expanded with an included cooperative online multiplayer mode. It is a single-player open-world game, but you can play a cooperative multiplayer mode called Legends, which also saw its own standalone release in 2021. Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut was released for PS4 and PS5 in August of 2021. It added the Iki Island story expansion, which sees Jin traveling to a new location to battle a Mongol tribe led by a shaman known as the Eagle. The PC version of the Director's Cut will include the base game, the Iki Island expansion, and the Legends multiplayer mode. Ghost of Tsushima sold 9.73 million copies as of July 2022, according to Sucker Punch. I know that game is on like PlayStation Plus, and I know there's a lot of open world games out there, including something like Horizon Forbidden West. And don't get me wrong, I'm looking forward to Horizon Forbidden West, but I mean, I played Horizon. I have a pretty good idea of what Horizon Forbidden West is. I played Zero Dawn, right? I've never played Ghost of Tsushima. I cannot wait. I really hope that PC version is good. I remember looking at Ghost of Tsushima and just being like, God, this is one of the most gorgeous open world games ever. I'm also watching Shogun on Disney Plus, which is a show set against the backdrop of like kind of feudal Japan and all that stuff. So I am on a bit of a samurai-esque kick at the moment. Maybe I should go back and watch The Last Samurai with Tom. Was it Tom Cruise in that movie, Last Samurai? It was it Christian Bale? It's either which one of those guys. It's Tom Cruise. And Hiroki Sanada, who is in Hiroki Sanada is also in Shogun, which I'm watching on Disney Plus. Anyways, on a bit of a samurai kick at the moment, live by the sword, die by the sword, all of that good stuff. I cannot wait for Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut to come to PC, though I guess I could have just bought a PS5 and played that version all this time ago, but I didn't. We're going to take one more break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the games that I've been playing. Stick around. Glitch Report ain't going nowhere. Welcome back to the podcast. Been playing a couple of games here. I got into the Callisto Protocols, a game that I bought like during like the Epic stores, like winter sale or whatever, Christmas sale, whatever. And it was a game that like when it came out, I was like pretty disappointed to hear about what was going on with the game from a technical standpoint, from a gameplay standpoint, from like a difficulty standpoint. It seemed like, while the Callisto Protocol's heart was in the right place in terms of being heavily influenced by something like Dead Space, it seemed like maybe technically and gameplay wise, it came up a little bit short. So when I saw the game was like 20 something bucks with the deluxe edition and all the DLC and stuff, I was like, all right, you know what? I finished Dead Space. I'm I'm down for another sci-fi horror game. And I don't know how much work they did post release, but it's totally fine. Like, I mean, it's not like the perfect game, but the issues that I remember hearing people talk about and all of that stuff with uh, the Callisto Protocol is pretty non-existent in this current version of the game with all the updates that they've done. It looks gorgeous. It's a gorgeous looking game. It's an incredibly violent and gory game. I would say even more gory and violent than something like Dead Space. In Dead Space, you have the whole point is that you're a space miner, so you don't have traditional weapons. You have a lot of mining equipment that you are using as guns to kill these enemies, and the enemies in the game are, usually weak on their limbs, right? So you're shooting off the limbs of some creepy crawly thing, or you're shooting the arm off so it can't grab you and all that stuff. So Dead Space, very much like violent and gory in terms of I am, decapitating enemies, I am cutting them in half with these crazy mining equipment, I'm shooting their limbs off, so on and so forth. And there is definitely an element of that in the Callisto Protocol. In fact, it feels like they added something called dismemberment mode into the game. I don't know if that was at launch or not, but I turned on dismemberment mode. I was like, sure, I just want to see give me Mortal Kombat levels of violence and gore. And brother, let me tell you, they have done that. It is gruesome. The violence in Callisto Protocol. Even when the enemies, like if you get killed by an enemy, there's often a lot of unique animations that they've done, and it's like stuff like, oh, the enemy like rips your face open through your jaw, or it cuts your head off, or it like peels back your skin or cuts off your arms and stuff, and it's really gruesome. Like the main protagonist can get killed in some incredibly wild ways. But the other thing that kind of sets obviously similarities are that they're both kind of violent horror games, whatever. One of the things that sets Callisto Protocol apart from Dead Space, for better or for worse, is that while Dead Space was more focused on you shooting the enemies, there was a lot more melee combat in the Callisto Protocol. You kind of start the game with a crowbar and you're just, bashing in the skulls of these enemies and all this, just beating them to death and all of this stuff. And eventually you upgrade, you get like a stun baton, and then the combat becomes more about, oh, can you stun or dismember the enemy and then use the gun, because you do get a gun, can you use the gun to like finish them off, right? So you might soften them up with the melee attack and then finish them off with the gun. And the reason that you might do that is because there's not a lot of bullets. It is a survival horror game, as you know and love it. There are not a lot of bullets in Callisto Protocol to come by. And even if you do find bullets, surprise, surprise, the inventory is very, very, very small. But you do find money in the game. You can find like upgrade terminals to upgrade your gun and your stun baton, and buy health packs and all of that stuff. But I am playing the game on easy because, again, I just want to see that game through to the end. I just want to finish. Callisto Protocol. I want to see where that story goes, and overall, like, it wears its influence on its sleeve, and it at times comes off more as an imitator than an innovator, especially in its kind of connection with original Dead Space. But I think Callisto Protocol, where it's at now, based on compared to where it was when it came out, I think is a solid experience. Again, it's a good looking game. I'm enjoying the campy, horror nature of being in this space world. I'm not going to spoil kind of the premise, but or anything like that. But beyond saying that, like, you go to a place that has seen some shit, and you are there to try to not only get out of this horrible situation, but figure out the true nature of the conspiracy around it. Very similar to something like a Dead Space, but I'm enjoying it. Obviously, if you have to choose between one or the other, or if you have both, or if you're gonna buy one of them, I think Dead Space is probably still the better game. But I think that Callisto Protocol is quite a bit of fun to be had, and if you got it on sale or whatever, it's a fun time. It is maybe a little rough around some of the edges. I think stuff like the combat can feel a little clunky in terms of the melee focus, and then I'm going to hit him, and then I'm going to dodge, I'm going to hit him, then I'm going to shoot him with the gun, or just the world's smallest backpack in a video game that I've ever seen. It's good, but it is a little rough around the edges, but I'm looking forward to playing more of it and seeing it through to the end. I'm probably this will be the last time I talk about Callisto Protocol until I finish it. And speaking of games that I am continuing to try to finish, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. We are well into the 80-hour mark, I think, at this point. If you watch the stream on Wednesday on twitch.tv/GnittWitt, we traveled to Vinland in search of revenge, and the experience on Vinland was very, very interesting because in Vinland, they take away all of your weapons and stuff that you had acquired. And the story is that you're kind of going into Vinland undercover to learn the lay of the land, to hunt and stalk your target and take them out. And the way that the equipment and progression works in Vinland is that it is all about hunting the animals and stealing, raiding your enemies, camps and bases and outposts, and then you're kind of buying and trading these resources for things like a sword, for things like a bow, for things like armor, for things like boots. So you are kind of forced to live off the land a little bit more in something like this compared to the main game. Because when you start, it's like, oh shit, I'm being attacked by a cougar. I don't have anything other than my fists. But if I kill this cougar, I can, use its leather to make armor, because I basically showed up with nothing because I'm trying to pretend I'm not a Viking so that I can sneak around this island of Vinland and figure out what's going on. An interesting, at least kind of interpretation of kind of the progression and leveling and crafting systems that existed in the main game, but also quite short. It took me like an hour and a half or so to do all that stuff. I didn't do everything. I actually was able to get through. I was so powerful just from a character level and abilities perspective that I was able to get through a lot of that game without all of the armor equipped and without all of the weapons equipped. Because, I have an ability that allows me to throw an enemy weapon that is on the ground. I have, a ton of different abilities and I'm just powerful enough from a raw attack and damage output standpoint that I was able to get through it. So, results may vary on how much you enjoy going to Vinland. If you are currently playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I thought it was an interesting, different take. It was kind of a nice change of pace, but also pretty short. And now I'm back to just grinding out that story in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. We're going to stream some more of it on Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, twitch.tv/GnittWitt. The plan is, again, to finish up Assassin's Creed Valhalla before Horizon Forbidden West comes out. Horizon Forbidden West is currently scheduled to come out on March 21st. So I have like a week, I basically got like a week or so to finish Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Will we finish it? I don't know, but head over to twitch.tv/GnittWitt to find out. That's going to do it for the podcast. I have been GnittWitt. Linktree.com/GnittWitt, GnittWitt. Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads. I am there. I got to record some more TikToks. I've been posting more clips on TikTok and Instagram and social media in general. So if you want to see me make fun of a Viking for being bald, in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, again, head over to YouTube or head over to TikTok or Instagram or wherever. And there's probably a video of me making fun of a Viking that we meet in Assassin's Creed Valhalla who's bald and his nickname is the Unlucky. And why is he unlucky? You'll find out. Plus me trying to get through an ambush of mountain lion cougars, whatever you want to call them, in Assassin's Creed Valhalla as well. That clip is also up now on social media, and more social media clips and TikToks and stuff like that coming very, very soon. I got a bunch of stuff that I'm writing for these TikToks as well. I just got to get around to editing those scripts, finalizing those scripts, and shooting them as well. I'll probably shoot them in a batch so that I can upload them throughout the time. So if you see me wearing the same shirt in every video, it's because I recorded them in the same day. That's going to do for the podcast. I have been GnittWitt. Happy gaming. Oh my God. Happy gaming. Take it easy. We'll see you next time. Au revoir.